We're here to educate and empower patients to make choices that are best for them. We're also here to decrease stigma around what it means to feel good and be high, hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing. The Green Nurse is a holistic cannabis nurse that teaches on the endocannabinoid system and the safe utilization of cannabis and other progressive tools to help people reach a better quality of life.
I was cannabis agnostic for many, many years. And you know, the more research I did, the more I discovered that cannabis is this amazing medicine.
I was told that I had a 4-stage pancreatic cancer. The doctor really told me he couldn't do anything else. He gave me her name and she called me and she came to my house. She started to give me cannabis. My oncologist was puzzled because he couldn't find the cancer anymore.
All of the learning that we get comes from the Green Nurses group, comes from their support, comes from their guidance. I trust everything that she says.
Simply meet people where they're at. The plant doesn't, stress to grow, so we don't stress to share it. We're healing people.
Cannabis has been used as a medicine for tens upon thousands of years. Here's the big message. Cannabis needs to be federally legal. We need to have laws that are the same across all 50 states that allow access to anyone and everyone who wants to utilize this powerful medicine.
Cannabis sooner in their lives, the quality of their life would have improved. So I've been a nurse since 1988, 33 years as a registered nurse, 7 years as a cannabis patient, and 5 years as a cannabis nurse. I was forced out of traditional nursing due to an illness in 2012. And over time with cannabis, plant medicine, and other progressive tools, including multiple holistic, integrative, functional health, healing modalities, I was able to heal, and I founded the Green Nurse. My story is really intense, and I'll be able to share it at the end if you're all interested in it, because it is really, really powerful. I was plagued with stigma when I first founded the Green Nurse, and I was asked to speak. I went to Boston College, graduated in 1988. 30 years later, in 2018, Boston College School of Nursing contacted me and asked me to come teach the advanced practice nurses the graduating nurse practitioner class on cannabinoid therapeutics. So I found it very interesting that I graduated in 1988, 30 years later, I'm standing in front of all these nurses, teaching them about cannabis as medicine. So I didn't come out of the cannabis closet right away, but what ended up happening is I knew that if I was gonna truly have an impact on the most people, I needed to get real. I needed to get raw, and I needed to share my story of healing. So I started a podcast in 2018. We're an award-winning podcast. We won 3 awards over the past 4 years. We're the #1 medical podcast in the United States. And so that podcast was when I came out of the cannabis closet and started to share my story. And I started to share stories of other patients and people that you would never ever think that use cannabis that have had amazing results improving in quality of their life. So I never learned about the endocannabinoid system, and we're going to talk about that today. And it is the most important system in our bodies. We weren't taught it in nursing school. It's not taught in medical school, but just because they don't teach it now doesn't mean that it's not real. And my goal for you all today is to have that aha moment, the miracle, which is a change of perception, where you're able to look at cannabis a little bit different than when you came in today. So, nursing taught me how to treat. Cannabis truly taught me how to heal. And that's because the endocannabinoid system allows us to heal ourselves with the right tools. Cannabis is one of them. So my background as a traditional nurse, I worked at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, Children's Hospital, and the Brigham and Women's Hospital for over 25 years, ages from pediatrics to geriatrics. I worked in the intensive care unit, cross-trained in all of them, critical care emergency nursing, infectious disease, occupational health, IV nursing, oncology nursing, and in the community, I did home infusion, visiting nurse, and hospice. So my nursing experience is very vast. I'm also a holistic nurse, so I had a lot of side gigs, working with patients doing energy healing, nutraceuticals, which is pharmacy-grade supplements. I was a women's health coach for 3 gyms, teaching on self-care for body transformation, energy healing, Reiki master, reconnective healing practitioner, And I'm currently using this new microcurrent device that's just been approved by the FDA for energy, frequency, and vibration. So now what I'm doing as a cannabis nurse is I'm pulling every single thing together that I've ever done as a nurse, and I'm applying it to how we can teach and educate patients on this most important system that we never learned about. So everything that we do or don't do in our lives affects the endocannabinoid system, and we're going to get into that right now. All right, next slide. Okay, so this is my disclaimer slide. So the green nurses at Holistic Caring Network. We're a global community of people, patients, and providers who have come together to provide solutions in the medical cannabis space. We have services for patients, for providers, and we have a CBD marketplace that is green nurse approved. So our patient services include medical card renewals in Massachusetts, cannabis nurse coaching globally in all states, all ages, including pediatrics. We have self-paced online patient programs. We offer energy healing, reconnective healing, Healy with cannabis education, and then we're going to talk about the private community at the end that you're all invited to come to. It's a free community, free introductory to cannabis course, free patient portal, free monthly webinar, and a free book club, and you don't even need to own the book. How cool is that? That's how badly we want you all to be educated, because this plant really works. Okay, so cannabinoid therapeutics. Cannabinoid therapeutics is much more than just cannabis, because everything that we do or don't do in our lives affects that system. And like I said, I never learned about it in nursing school. It's not taught in medical school. But we have an endocannabinoid system, not because of the cannabis plant, but because we make components in our body just like the plant. Now, when I learned this, that was the aha moment for me, and I'm going to show you some slides in a few minutes. Okay, so here we go, the next slide. So the Marijuana Tax Act, we're going to get a little bit into history here, because I know for a fact that my grandmother and my mother were plagued with stigma. Actually, when I first started using cannabis, my mom blocked me on Facebook, and she wrote me out of her will. Okay, it was interesting. But I was sick, suffering, and dying at one point, and I was on over 18 pharmaceuticals. So over time, as I started to get better and to heal, what ended up happening is I started the podcast, taking care of patients. Patients are sharing stories, and my mom finally got on the bus, and I'm going to share her story in a few minutes. So the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 made it illegal to grow and produce cannabis, and it was largely racially motivated against those who were black and brown-skinned. It was racially motivated to protect the paper industry, the food industry, the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, and the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, so prior to 1937, cannabis was in over 600 pharmaceutical preparations and was in the pharmacopoeia, which is all the pharmaceuticals. And I have a really cool story really quickly. So one of my cannabis nursing friends, who I actually didn't know was a cannabis nurse because she kept it in the closet. She's 75 years old. She was one of the nurses that came to my home and educated me of how and why I should use the plant. And she disclosed something to me that I really was blown away. She said, Sherri, at the time she was 70, she goes, Sherri, I'm gonna tell you a little secret. I've been using cannabis every day since I was 17. I was like, what? And she goes, yeah. And I got to tell you something. I'm not on any ongoing pharmaceuticals, and I've never been hospitalized. I said, well, is that for everyone? And she goes, no, this is my personal story. Everyone's different. But I had to take a look at that. I really needed to think about it. And then she says, as a matter of fact, my father was a pharmacist here in Brockton, and he carried those 600 preparations in his pharmacy. So that was something else that I needed to look at. So now we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit more about history. And there is some historical stuff here. And the reason why I want to cover it is because it is information that has been kept from us for a very, very long time. So in 1954, cannabis entered into the United States and entered into the pharmacopoeia by 1920. Like I said, by 1920, there were over 600 formulations of pharmaceuticals with cannabis. 1937, the reefer madness, the marijuana tax, alcohol prohibition moved to cannabis. So when alcohol prohibition ended, they switched it over to cannabis. And like I said, it was racially motivated. So 1941, it was removed from the pharmacopoeia, meaning that cannabis was removed from the list of pharmaceuticals that were listed in this pharmacopoeia, and the American Medical Association was against the removal of it. Okay, you need to think about that, was against it. 1964, THC and CBD were isolated. It's not on that slide, but I thought it was important for you all to hear. Dr. Raphael Mechoulam is an Israeli scientist who actually is the great-grandfather of cannabis. He's 91 years old today. He's still alive. He is the pioneer of this plant, and the discoveries that he's made are mind-boggling. And like I said, you know, he isolated these molecules, and through the course of time, 1988 to 1992, 1988 was the discovery of the endocannabinoid system. So getting back to 1970, the Controlled Substance Act was also politically and racially motivated once again. What they ended up doing was they classified cannabis as a Schedule I drug, meaning that it has no medicinal value and is highly abusive and addictive. This was meant to jail the protesters of the Vietnam War and to further add the racial injustice of American drug laws. Okay, so here we go. 1988, 1992, I had said they discovered the endocannabinoid system, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then in 1996, California passed Proposition 215, making medical cannabis legal, and since then, other states have followed suit. In 2012, Massachusetts passed medical cannabis. I got my card in 2014 when I started my journey. Massachusetts adult use recreational cannabis was passed in 2016. In 2017, I formed the Green Nurse. In 2018, this is another critical piece of information of why nurses are so passionate about this, and I'm going to talk about this slide in a minute. But the National Council of State Boards of Nursing that puts on the nursing exam for all nurses to be registered in each particular state put out a call to action in the Journal of Nursing Regulations. This is a 64-page document that put out a call to action that all nurses, advanced practice nurses, nursing students, nurse practitioners must have 6 essential areas of clinical knowledge when it comes to medical cannabis and working with patients. That's key. As nurses, what we are doing is we are pushing for education in the medical schools, in the nursing schools, and we want all nurses to be tested on the endocannabinoid system. Because when you learn about it, like I said, once you go down the rabbit hole, there's no going back. All right, that's that one. And then, okay. So here we are today creating the Green Nurses at Holistic Caring Network. What we're doing is we're creating an HMO, an ecosystem for patients and providers. So here we go. We have the state photograph, states with legalized cannabis. There's 37 medical and 18 adult use states. And so one of the things that's really important about that is when we talk about medical versus recreational, I'm just going to bottom line it for you. The minute cannabis enters into your body, it acts as medicine, okay? Period, no matter which way you use it. So there's 3 ways to use it, I say. Medically, recreationally, and irresponsibly. So we even like to get away from that. The use and the misuse of cannabis, because you can misuse it. But when we're talking about medical cannabis, what we're doing is we're talking about relieving symptoms and improving quality of life so people can live their best life. Okay, next one. Okay, so here's another one. Okay, remember how I just told you about 1970, the Controlled Substance Act, how they placed it on the Schedule I? Well, look at this slide here. In 2003, the government took out a US patent, 6630507. The patent was, cannabinoids are found to protect cells, tissues, and DNA from damage and decay, limiting neurological damage following ischemic insults, such as stroke and trauma, or in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases, such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and dementia. The government had a patent. Let that sink in, okay? Talk about polarity. Talk about cognitive dissonance, right? Thinking and feeling something different. You know, the bottom line is that this is real. This is real, and I want you all to understand. Okay, so slide 9, medical myths. Okay, so I go through all of this. A lot of, when we teach and we educate with the most current research. And so all the myths that are out there that can be debunked by the most current research. So, is it about getting high? No, it's not. I'm actually changing the dialogue around what that word means. Okay, cannabis first brought me hope. Then it brought me inspiration. Then it allowed me to grow, and it allowed me to heal. Okay, I'm not high. I'm medicated appropriately. I'm living my best life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And there's a lot of different products. So the cannabis plant has over 500 constituents in it. THC is the only molecule that can be impairing, and it's only impairing in high doses, not in low doses. And there's other types of cannabinoids, like I said, in the plant, CBD, THCA, CBN, and all of the other parts of the plant do not cause impairment. Get fat, right? You think people, if you're gonna use cannabis, you're all gonna get chubby, you're gonna have the munchies, and you're gonna eat. Well, let me just look at me. How fat do I look? Right? I don't think so. So anyway, it's a myth. And when we talk about the endocannabinoid system, I'm going to explain to you why it's a myth. As a matter of fact, cannabis works really well with patients that have diabetes. It helps to auto-regulate insulin, and we'll get into that in a little bit. There's also been studies that have shown that people that use cannabis every day have a lower BMI, which is amazing. And people that use cannabis every day, there's another research study, exercise 45 minutes longer than those that don't. There we go, there's some research for that. And then we think, okay, it's gonna make you dumb. It's not gonna, your intelligence, your cognitive function's gonna decrease. Well, that's been debunked. Listen, I wrote a chapter in the first cannabis nursing textbook using cannabis. I don't know about you, but I think it made my brain work a little bit better. And when we talk about, it does work. It works on different areas of the brain. It improves neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to communicate with itself. It does neurogenesis, which means it helps to create new brain cells, and it's a neuroprotectant, protecting the brain. Okay, so small doses right there, improves focus and attention. Large doses, and we're not talking about consuming cannabis in a way to get high. We're talking about consuming cannabis to treat symptoms of chronic illness and to improve quality of life. Cancer, it doesn't cause cancer. It doesn't. As a matter of fact, long-term cannabis smokers showed lower incidence of cancer than non-smokers. And this isn't nicotine, I'm just talking about cannabis smoking in general. And actually cannabis is an anti-tumor. It actually works on cancer cells 4 different ways: anti-metastatic, anti-angiogenic, anti-proliferative, and apoptosis. And there are videos out there that actually shows slides, videos of slides of cancer cells and normal cells, and how THC and the other plant works directly on the cancer cells, leaving the healthy cells alone. That's mind-boggling. Okay, so here we go. Miss debunked. Next one. Okay, so I already talked about this, but just really quickly again. The National Council State Boards of Nursing, I held up that book over there, and it's like I said, it's the Journal of Nursing Regulation. It is a very, very, very high prestige group, and the cannabis nurses in the space that have been forging ahead, educating, they got wind of us. They were like, whoa, I think we need to look into this. There's something about this. And so they gathered a ton of information and they wrote that 64-page document. And all nurses must have 6 principles of essential knowledge when it comes to Cannabis Is Medicine. And I'll just read them really quick. Number 1, nurses must have a working knowledge of the current state laws around medical and adult use cannabis. Nurses must understand the medical marijuana programs in each state. Nurses must have an understanding of the endocannabinoid system, receptors, cannabinoids, and all of the interactions. Nurses must have an understanding of cannabis pharmacology and research associated. Nurses must identify safety considerations for patients. That's why I'm here. And nurses shall approach the patient without judgment in regards to their choice of treatment or preferences in managing symptoms of pain and chronic illness. So there we go. Nurses are the game changers. We are in revolutionary times where we are changing how we approach and take care of patients. It truly is about patient empowerment. Okay, here we go. Cannabis and seniors. All right, guys. So in the 2020 CNN Health Report, Palmer and Hand surveyed 15,000 seniors on cannabis use, and cannabis use doubled from 2015 to 2018 to 4.2% across the board. And so when they did this health report, rates were up for women, minorities, college educated, and income over 75,000. And so what we're seeing now is baby boomers starting to show an interest. More and more of the seniors are starting to get on the bus, as we call it. It is a really, really safe plant. However, it is not like pharmaceuticals, okay? And it's not like all plant medicines. Safety is the utmost importance, and that's what we're going to get into. The goal of cannabis as medicine, like I said, is to relieve suffering, improve quality of life, make everything that you're doing now work better. All right, next. Okay, whoop. This is a good one. What's important as we age, as we get older? I'd say the number one thing is independence. Maintaining our independence, preserving memory, mobility, independence, and quality of life. Listen, we don't die of old age. Seriously. We die of age-related diseases caused by stress and inflammation based on the choices that we make. Okay, so here's my mom. This is a good one. Hey everybody, it's Sherri Tutkus from Green Nurse, Living Your Best Life, and I'm here with my mother. Hi, Mamacita.
Hello, my darling daughter.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
How is cannabis oil helping you to live your best life?
Oh, by making me virtually pain-free. I'm not saying that every single bit of pain is gone, but I can function now. I couldn't function before. I couldn't move. It was so painful to move. And yet it was so painful to lie in the same still position, to sit. I mean, I had to keep rotating things around. And it's just going to be freedom. Freedom from pain, freedom from feeling depressed about the pain.
So cannabis is
living my
giving
best-
you freedom
Yes,
to live your best life.
exactly.
Mom,
Exactly.
I love you.
I love you too, Sherri.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Remember, it's about living your best life. And this was my mother who blocked me on Facebook and wrote me out of her will. She was sending me letters every month, and every letter that I got, I stuck in the freezer. And then what ended up happening is I started to take care of a nun. In 2018, Sister Suzanne, she's been on my podcast a few times. She has chronic regional pain syndrome, which is a complete 100% debilitating chronic myofascial pain syndrome, and the pain rotates through the body. She's had a stroke. She's had a lot of different issues, a lot of complications. She was on a ton of medications. She was actually on 400 micrograms of fentanyl when she came to me. And her quality of life was horrible. She wasn't able to work in the church. She was literally, she said she was dying. And cannabis gave her hope for the first time. And over the course of 6 months, we got her pain managed under control. And then after that, her doctor started weaning her off of her fentanyl, and we would adjust her cannabis. And she's basically, it's been 2 years. She is now completely 100% opioid-free. Not all pharmaceuticals, but the opioids, the antidepressants, the anti-anxiety agents, and the sleep agents completely off of. And so she came on my podcast, and and she basically, I had to ask her. I said, there's a lot of people that are very religious and that are really plagued with stigma when it comes to using this plant. So, I said, with all due respect, I said, this question is for my mother. I said, sister, what would Jesus say about all this cannabis? And she looked at me and she held up her finger and she goes, Sherri, Jesus would say, what the frig did it take you so long to use this God-given plant that I created for you? Okay. So then I took the snap of that and I sent it to my mother because I wanted my mother, she was suffering. And so about 6 weeks later, my mother called me up and she said, what's the gateway? I was like, all right, let's start with topicals. So when we're working with patients, we never try to force anything on everyone. It's really, really about meeting people where they're at, educating them and helping them to make choices that are going to improve their quality of life. Okay. All right, so here we go. We're going to get into the meat and potatoes. This is my favorite part. And then I'm going to pull out my umbrella and tie it all in to help it all make sense. So the endocannabinoid system, we have an endocannabinoid system, like I said before, not because of the plant, but because we create components in our body like the plant. The goal of the endocannabinoid system is to, or the goal of Cannabinoid Therapeutics is to help nourish and support that system so our bodies can auto-regulate and do its job to keep us functioning optimally. So cannabis is a pleiotropic. What does that mean? It works on multiple different systems at the same time, producing a physiological response at the exact same time. So cannabis works on all 11 organ systems, our immune system, and all of the neurotransmitter signaling systems. I'm sure you've heard of dopamine, you've heard of serotonin, you've heard of opioid signaling, right? And so cannabis works on all of those things at the exact same time. And basically, cannabis is one of the tools in the toolbox. And the goal of cannabis is to take the least amount to get the perceivable effect below the threshold of feeling impaired. And that's what we do as nurses. So in other words, the goal isn't to get high. The goal is to feel good, to live your best life, to engage in life, to be able to do more things for health and wellness, right? It's not about, I call it stoned and Cheetos and, TV and all that stuff. That's not what it's about. So, the endocannabinoid system, right, basically it controls respiratory, sensory, mucoskeletal, renal, lymphatic, digestive, reproductive, endocrine, cardiovascular, nervous system. So it regulates our stress response, our metabolism, appetite, mood, pain, energy, sensation, inflammation, muscle control, and eye pressure, which is fascinating. Okay, so now we're going to go to relax, refresh, and recharge. So I love this slide too. So cannabis regulates our eating, our sleeping, how we relax, how we forget, and how we protect our bodies. And this is very similar to the slide that I just showed before. So we'll go to the next one. Okay, so here we go. This one is my favorite slide. And I'm going to pull my umbrella out here so I can demonstrate what this means. Okay, so when I first started teaching about the endocannabinoid system, I'd have a lot of people raise their hands, especially doctors and nurses, and they would say, Sherri, it's so abstract. Where is it? I've never heard about it. I've never learned about it. And I say, well, you know what? You're right. It is kind of abstract. So I needed to think of a way to educate people in a way so it would make sense. And so I thought of an umbrella, and I want you all to imagine that umbrella is you, okay? All of the different spokes of the umbrella are our different organ systems, as you can see up there. Nervous, endocrine, circulatory, respiratory, integumentary, reproductive, lymphatic, digestive, immune, urinary, skeletal, muscular. Then we have all of these little fabric pieces, the different color fabric pieces that attach to the spokes of the umbrella. And those are the neurotransmitter signaling systems, that dopamine, that serotonin. Okay, the fabric pieces of the umbrella give messages to the spokes of the umbrella to tell our body to do something or stop doing something. The endocannabinoid system is an on-off switch, giving messages all day long to our entire umbrella to keep it working optimally. The endocannabinoid system sits at the very tippy top of the umbrella, and it blankets, just imagine it, blanketing right over our umbrella because we have cannabinoid receptors on all of our 11 organ systems, on all of the cell surfaces. We have cannabinoid receptors at all of the neurotransmitter signaling junction sites, meaning that we produce components in our body like the plant upon demand, depending upon what's going on in our umbrella. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So the endocannabinoid system is an on-off switch. So say, for example, you're exposed to danger. Okay, so there's a dangerous situation at hand. The endocannabinoid system kicks in and gives messages to release adrenaline to help to protect us. Okay, when the danger is over, the feedback loop tells the body to turn off the adrenaline. Well, guess what? If you're not making enough of your own cannabinoids at the tippy top of the umbrella, what happens? Messages don't get where they need to go at all, and the adrenaline doesn't shut off. Okay, so we're in a fight or flight response for much longer than we should be. Another example, inflammatory response to injury. So say, for example, you cut your knee, right? Endocannabinoid system kicks in and says, whoop, I got an injury here. I got to send blood. I got to send, it's an inflammatory response. It turns on to help to protect the area. And then when it starts to wash away, the things are starting to get better. The endocannabinoid system says, oh, I'm good. I don't need any more inflammatory processes happening. I'm going to shut off. Well, if you don't make enough of your own internal endogenous cannabinoids, then sometimes the inflammatory process doesn't shut off. So it's an on-off switch all day long. Here's another really good example. It comes to cancer cells. Our cells in our body reproduce daily. Every 7 years, we are new people. Our body is constantly reproducing cells. We have trillions of cells, and look at a cell as its own universe. Okay, so when we are replicating cells in our body, we want to replicate a healthy cell. We don't want to replicate a sick cell, right? And so in the terms of cancer, what happens is the endocannabinoid system isn't working functionally, so what's happening is cell replication is happening over and over and over with the cancer cells. That's just another quick example. Okay, so cannabinoids are needed to keep our bodies running smoothly like a well-oiled machine, and if we're not making enough, messages don't get where they need to go, and our body starts to become dysregulated. And I think this next slide is probably going to make the most sense right here. This is the shoe drop slide. This was the slide that was like, whoa, I can't even believe this. So we make components in our body like the plant. The plant makes THC. We make a molecule called anandamine. The THC molecule and the anandamine molecule are the exact same molecular shape. I never learned that. THC, anandamine. THC plant, anandamine humans, same shape, does the exact same thing in the body. The difference is the THC molecule is 10 times stronger than our anandamine molecule. Or another way of saying that is the anandamine molecule that we make is 1/10 the strength of the THC molecule. That is why you don't need to use a lot. You don't need to use a lot to make this plant work for you. That's one of the bottom lines. So let me just see if there's anything else. So other thing too that's really cool is they discovered the anandamine molecule between 1988 and 1992. And they decided to call it anandamine because ananda is the Sanskrit word for bliss. So anandamine is the bliss molecule, and anandamine has the same shape as the THC molecule. Okay, so here we go. This next one, I think it's all going to start to connect. Okay, so remember how I said if we're not making enough of our own, if we're not making enough of our own internal endogenous cannabinoids at the tippy top of the umbrella, messages don't get to the spokes of the umbrella. Messages don't get accurately to the neurotransmitter signaling systems. And if they don't get where they need to go, what happens is our body systems start to break down. And so the endocannabinoid system is the maestro of the symphony. It's present in every physiological system in our body, and the role of it is to keep us healthy. And so you can see here with this diagram, right, the plant, phytocannabinoids from the plant, endocannabinoids that we make, both work on the cell receptor. So the middle image is the cell receptor, right, the neurotransmitters. Plant can feed the cell, we can feed the cell. The goal is for us to start using plant medicines and the other tools that support it so we can start producing our own. So there is the ability. So if you have an endocannabinoid deficiency, it doesn't mean that you're going to have it forever. If you can support the system using the plant and other tools, you can upregulate and you can start to produce more of your own. I'm a classic example. What I use for cannabis now is much less than what I used 8 years ago. Completely 100% different. I don't need as much because my system is auto-regulated. Okay, let's just see if that one there. All right, so a little bit more about the endocannabinoid deficiency. So the 3 top conditions, we have fibromyalgia, migraine, and irritable bowel. So Dr. Ethan Russo describes this in a series of research papers in 2004. All 3 conditions manifest with hyperalgesic states that must be clinically diagnosed based on what a patient says. So that means that tests do not show anything to be able to provide that diagnosis. So all of these fibromyalgia, migraine, and irritable bowel, they're all diagnosis of exclusion, meaning that they work a patient up to make a diagnosis based on eliminating other things. So many times patients develop one or more of these, and there's a risk to continue to develop more. They did a study, 200 fibromyalgia patients, 97% of them had migraine headaches. So what happened was too, and the other thing that they've shown over time is they've been able to do radiographic imaging, MRIs of people's brains that have a migraine headache, and it was showing an overabundance of receptors in their brain actually looking for that anandamide molecule. And they weren't able to make it because they had that endocannabinoid deficiency. All right, here we go, causes. All right, this is a good one. All right, so here we go. There's good news and bad news. The bad news is as we age, the amount of our internal endogenous cannabinoids, that anandamide that we make, starts to decrease. Genetics plays a huge part in how we're producing our own molecules in our body. Some people are predispositioned to diseases, and if they are, hereditary, genetics plays a part in whether your endocannabinoid system is toned and working properly or isn't. Obesity, poor diet, fast food, fried food, fake food, artificial flavors, artificial coloring, trans fat, hydrogenated oils, sugar, all downregulates the endocannabinoid system. Smoking cigarettes and chronic alcohol use. So alcohol in particular is toxic to all 11 organ systems. Alcohol is toxic to all neurotransmitter signaling systems. And I have people raise their hand, oh, what about the red wine? I go, nah, sorry. You can get grapeseed extract, you can get resveratrol, and there's other things that you can do to get those types of things instead of drinking the wine. Polypharmacy, this is another really big one. So polypharmacy is when you are on 5 or more pharmaceuticals. If you're on 5 or more pharmaceuticals, there's a 50% chance that those pharmaceuticals are interacting with you not in a good way. 10 or more pharmaceuticals, 100% chance of drug-to-drug interaction and not in a good way. The other thing that people don't realize is that, and I learned this through time, through studying, is that a lot of the pharmaceuticals that exist have a drug nutrient depletion, meaning that if you take that pharmaceutical, there's specific micronutrients that you're not absorbing. So you need to eat more of those foods or you need to supplement. So I encourage people to Google, you can Google that, or you can join our community and we can provide all that information for you. Chronic stress. Stress creates inflammation. I'm just gonna end it with there, you all know. Lack of exercise. Here's a really cool one. Motion is the lotion, okay? When we exercise, we produce endorphins. Guess what is causing those endorphins to be produced? The endocannabinoid system. The anandamide gets released to create the endorphins for that feel-good feeling, the bliss-like molecule. So exercise improves our endocannabinoid system. Diminished restorative sleep. If you're not getting a good night's sleep, going to downregulate your endocannabinoid system. Diminished social interactions, lack of touch and laughter. So we know over the course of the pandemic, we've all had to be isolated and be alone, not being able to touch or hug, and all of that and laugh. All of that downregulates our endocannabinoid system. So you can see that everything that we do or don't do in our lives affects that very important system. I've had people say, oh, what about this in moderation? I go, listen, you wouldn't eat rat poison in moderation. So seriously, it's really about looking at all of your choices and being aware that what we do in our lives either supports the system or doesn't. Okay.
Can I ask a question now, or do you want us to wait until the end?
If it's a burning question, you can ask it now, because I don't want you to forget.
I've enjoyed the 40 years since I had one. I enjoyed it. I'm 40 years older than I was then when I had it. I have medical conditions now. And I would like to try doing it again. And I talked to the doctors about it. And they said, do not just be careful. that when I bought it as a younger person, that I got the best stuff. I get good
Best stuff, I know.
The thing is, when you buy it in the store, as a non-prescriptional item, you can buy it of different strengths. One, how do you know how the level, as a beginner, how would you know how to buy it at a beginner level so you don't get on that high that
Right, so you're gonna work with us. But I'm gonna talk about dosing strategies and how to shop. So when you are shopping for cannabis, the number one thing is you wanna make sure there's a certificate of analysis. If they can't prove what's in it, don't buy it. Don't buy anything at a gas station. If it doesn't have a lab test that goes with it, do not buy it. Okay, so as nurses, what we're doing is, because green nurses, all of us nurses, we're all medical cannabis patients. Every single one of us that works in our organization, we've all overcome chronic debilitating illnesses using this plant, and it's expensive. And I don't want people wasting their money. Trust me, I wasted thousands of dollars trying to figure out how to make this work for me. So right now, we've developed a program to help people get there quicker. And so we're gonna talk about dosing strategies in just a little bit, but the number one thing is making sure you have a quality product. And you also wanna look at the type of products that you wanna consume. And we're gonna go over methods of administration and what's available. So we go back to supporting the endocannabinoid system. It's literally everything that we just talked about. Food is medicine. We want to use whole foods, adaptogens, supplements. You know, there's a lot of good Ayurvedic herbs that are out there. I'm sure you guys heard of turmeric, right? Those things are really good for you. Curcumin. You know, the plant has over 500 constituents. Terpenes are found in fruits and vegetables, so you can improve your endocannabinoid system by eating these whole foods. Regular exercise, motion is the lotion, stress management, meditation, breath work. We have mind-body medicine. All of these things here help to support and nourish the endocannabinoid system and will make the cannabis that you choose to use work better. Massage, therapeutic touch, aromatherapy, acupuncture, chiropractic care, essential oils, energy work, and Reiki. Social connections, being engaged with people, talking to people, having a social life, that helps to support the endocannabinoid system. Limiting alcohol, quitting smoking, restorative sleep, laughter. You know, laughter is the best medicine. And then you can see at the very bottom, what supports the endocannabinoid system? Cannabis. I put cannabis last, right? So like I said, Cannabinoid Therapeutics is much more than just cannabis. Cannabis is one piece of the pie. The rest of the pie are all of those things up there. All right, so cannabis is medicine. Okay, this is really cool. It's a safe plant. Like I talked about before, it works as a pleiotropic, helping us to stay in balance. Different parts of the plant do different things. Side effects are dose dependent. Microdosing is best because it mimics the endocannabinoid system. So if you remember the umbrella, right, what's going on? All of our different organ systems are constantly doing stuff to keep us in balance. The endocannabinoid system's going on and off all day long. So it makes sense that we wouldn't just be doing one big giant dose of cannabis, but we would be doing little bits throughout the day with different types of products. Okay, let's see what's going there. So like I said, side effects are dose dependent. Some side effects is the other thing I like to talk about. Some side effects are the actual effects that certain patients are looking for. So if you think about the red eyes, people are like, oh, the red eyes. Well, guess what? The glaucoma patient wants the red eyes. You know why? Because the red eyes indicate that the vessels in the eyes are dilated, are open and dilated and not constricted. And so there's more blood flow going to the eye to decrease pressure. The other example is dry mouth. Okay, everyone's like, oh my God, I got the cotton mouth. Well, the patient that has ALS, who's drooling, wants the cotton mouth. They want to decrease the amount of saliva that they are producing. Increased appetite. Well, guess what? The patient that can't get anything down because of chemo, nausea, vomiting, whatever related issues, right? It increases their appetite. People that have illnesses that they can't eat. It really works well. Forgetfulness. People will say, oh God, it's going to make me forget. Well, in small doses, depending upon the type of plant, the parts of the plant that you use, it doesn't make you forget. It actually improves cognitive function. It's a neuroprotectant, neuroplasticity, and neurogenesis. So pharmaceutical interactions are dose dependent. I like to talk about that really quickly. It's very, very rare with doses of 20 milligrams of THC or less and 100 milligrams of CBD or less. So I've worked with over 4,000 patients, pediatrics to geriatrics, all different types of medical conditions, and I have not seen one drug interaction in a bad way. Some of the drug interactions that I've seen are actually interactions that we want to see, which means that the cannabis is making the pharmaceutical work better, so patients don't need as much. Really interesting. Okay. What was it? What was that? It's an upper. Well, it's dose dependent. So if you do too much cannabis, guess what? You're going to be couch locked, right? It's all dose dependent. So, and that's the biphasic nature of the plant. So in lower doses, it does one thing. In higher doses, it does something else. Okay, so let's see. So when we talk about, okay, so when you're on pharmaceuticals, if you guys are deciding to go out and look and shop, if you're taking a pharmaceutical that interacts with grapefruit, all I like to make the suggestion is this: dose the cannabis 2 hours before or 2 hours after any pharmaceutical that you're taking with grapefruit. And the reason why is because our drugs get metabolized in this liver system. It's called the CYP450 system. Drugs get metabolized out of there, and so does cannabis. And so the goal is we don't want them to compete. You know, we want all of the effects to be working synergistically. The only exception is if patients are taking narcotics or opioids, we want them to take the cannabis at the same time, because what it does is it works in synergy. It doesn't compete, and it actually decreases the amount of narcotics that patients need over time when they take it together. Okay. Let's see, Project CBD is my next slide. So this is a really great tool here. So I just took this screenshot of from Project CBD. It's a great resource, and these are all different links that shows different studies and information on cannabis. So you can see the different things that it works on. All of these different links have research that's associated with it. So that's why I wanted to show this slide. Okay. Special considerations. Here's a good one. All right, here we go. As we get older, what happens? We've got multiple conditions, symptoms, and medicines. Everything in our body starts to slow down. Our metabolism slows down, right? And so what does that mean? We have reduced bioavailability of medicines, and bioavailability of medicines means this: our body's ability to take that medicine and use it for an effect. Okay, we also have reduced liver and kidney excretion. So as we get older, the system, that CYP450 system that metabolizes pharmaceuticals, becomes less efficient, as much as 30%. So that's why it's important to work with cannabis specialists such as nurses to maximize your therapeutic potential and minimize side effects for the best outcome. Okay. All right, so here we go. I'll tell you, our priority is safety, because we've seen the miracles that this plant can do. And so as we get older, we have problems with balance, vision, hearing, mobility, and cognitive function. And oftentimes what happens is poor diet, alcohol, smoking, and sedentary lifestyle. So when you first start to use cannabis, you need to be really cognizant of these things and just pay attention, because we don't want anyone falling. You know, we want you to use this plant in a safe way. We don't want anything to happen. So these are just things, you know, and vision too. You think about as you get older, when you're buying products, the labels are so little. Like, I need a magnifying glass to read them, you know? And then hearing. So this is another thing too with our education that we're providing. So people that are hard of hearing, we have closed caption podcasts for people. So we want people to be able to get the information. And cognitive function. Oftentimes instructions are difficult for people as they get older. So we're doing everything that we can to teach and educate, so we reach patients and meeting them where they're at. All right, so safety considerations. So the other thing too I like to say too is when we start Cannabis Is Medicine, we need to remember it's not the end-all be-all. And it may take some time to work, and reducing pharmaceuticals is possible. I am not anti-pharma. What I am really all about is optimal health and wellness, and whatever it takes to get there. Whether you choose to use cannabis solely, whether you choose to use cannabis with traditional medications, or if you're using traditional medications and you're doing fine and you don't need cannabis, that's great. But the goal, like we said, is to improve quality of life. And in my experience is that patients do really, really well with the combined, meaning that they're combining both traditional with plant medicines. They have the better outcome. Okay, so products and routes of administration. All right, this is a big one. I'm going to tell you they all work. But what we need to do is we need to find out what works for you. And so that's the importance of working with a clinician to help you shop. The most important thing, like I said, is about the certificates of analysis. And we're coming up with a Green Nurse approved program in our community, and we're vetting products, we're vetting CBD products, and we're vetting cannabis products. We're actually vetting dispensaries because we don't want people to be taken advantage of. Like I said, we are nurses and we are patients. We've been on other side of the bed. So when we look at you guys, we see you not only as a nurse, but we see you as a patient as well, because we're patients. Okay, so these here, vaporization of flower. So vaporization, inhalation. So inhalation is really quick. It gets into your system really fast, and it can last anywhere from 1 to 4 hours. I hate to say 1 to 2. It depends upon how many puffs that you take. But it's really, really great, and it can be mild to intense depending upon the amount of THC and the CBD that you use. THC and CBD are like peanut butter and jelly. CBD allows patients to tolerate THC without being impaired, and there's a physiological reason for that. Edibles. I don't recommend starting edibles or gummies right away if you're new to cannabis. I really like patients starting with oils, with a tincture to titrate, to figure out how it works for you. And so tinctures and elixirs, those sublingual oral mucosa. So what happens is you put it under your tongue and you hold it there and then you swallow. Onset is anywhere, I've seen 5 to 15 minutes. The duration can be 2 to 4 hours. It's really, really easy to control. And when we teach patients how to look at their CBD bottles and how to dose appropriately per drop. Sublingual sprays. I actually have one of those and I love it. It's a spray that I just open up my mouth and just do the CBD right in my mouth if I need it, because if I can't inhale, I use inhalation for panic attacks. It is studied, it has been researched, PTSD. If you go into that panic attack mode, inhalation can help break it really, really quickly without you being impaired. However, I don't smoke in public all the time. So I use a sublingual spray. So instead of me taking a puff off of my vaporizer, I'll pull out the spray, just do a little meditation, and it prevents me from going into that full-blown panic attack. Concentrated oils. So I'm sure you've heard of dabbing, resins, oils, waxes. That's just another way of medicating. It's very high THC, and I don't think it's appropriate for newbies, for people that are exploring cannabis. It's really for a lot of people that have really sick, chronic, debilitating illnesses, and they need that high concentrated oil. Okay, then you have FICO. FICO is full extract cannabis oil. I'm not sure if y'all heard of Rick Simpson. Rick Simpson's got a great story, and it has to do with cancer, but it's a long story. I'm not going to get into that. But FICO is full extract cannabis oil. It's made by extracting the cannabis in an alcohol-based tincture, and then they cook off the alcohol, and then you're left with this thick black oil. And if you have a gram of oil and it tests at 60% THC, that's 600 milligrams of THC. That's way too high for people to be consuming. But a lot of patients that are cancer patients, they need that high amount of THC to reach that apoptosis. THC induces cancer cell death. So we use a lot of FICO for patients that have cancer, and we slowly titrate them up to be able to use it. Suppositories. I love suppositories. They're great. I mean, they can be... It's really, really great for patients that want to start dialing up on their THC. And the reason why is because it doesn't cause as much impairment. It's a really good way for patients to go to bed, put a suppository in, and it works while they're sleeping. I know, it sounds crazy. Even vaginal suppositories. So women that have, menstrual issues, cramps, endometriosis, we've seen really good results with people using the suppositories and actually using a topical on their belly. And like I said, topicals and transdermal patches. We're going to get into topicals. That's one of the things we're going to focus on today. All right. Okay, so dosing strategies. I love this. This is the part. So this is Dr. Raphael Mechoulam. He's the Israeli scientist that isolated THC in 1964. He's 91 years old. And it was really interesting. I didn't think he's so famous. He's on LinkedIn, and I had a bunch of questions. And so I thought, oh, I'm just going to ask him these questions, and what's the worst thing that's going to happen? He's not going to answer. Well, he replied. He replied back, and he actually provided research. One of my questions to him was, do our cannabis requirements change over time as we change? And I kind of knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from him because I couldn't find research on it. And the answer was yes. Our cannabis requirements change over our time as our bodies change, especially as we become healthier. We become more auto-regulated and we don't need as much. So when you start to use cannabis, dosing strategies is no two people will respond the same way, not even identical twins. Okay, so a lot of times I'll have, be working with a patient, and then, she wants her daughter to be seen, and she goes, oh, but my interaction with this, I go, I guarantee you, you and your daughter are not going to respond to cannabis the same way, and you probably are not going to be taking the same products. One size fits all approach does not work. Okay, this is why medical professionals have a really, really hard time, because they're used to working with what? Pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are single isolated molecules. So if you think about it, we go back to the endocannabinoid system. You introduce a pharmaceutical into your body, one molecule does one thing. It can also disrupt multiple other things at the same time. You have the cannabis plant, multiple compounds, raining on our umbrella, going where it needs to go, doing what it needs to do to keep our bodies in homeostasis or balance. So dosing needs to be titrated and adjusted over time. Like I'd said before, microdosing mimics the endocannabinoid system. Usually when I'm working with patients, depending upon meeting them where they're at, most patients will start either 2, 3, or 4 times a day. The goal, like I said before, is to take the smallest dose possible to get the perceivable effect that you're looking for. You don't want to medicate. You don't want to medicate in a way that it's going to make you feel worse. The goal of medical cannabis is to make you feel better. So we want to look for that sweet spot. I call it the Goldilocks zone for optimal relief. And so like I said before too, the Green Nurse, we follow flow criteria. So flow criteria means this, is your cannabis product should be made with flowering strains of hemp or cannabis. Believe it or not, there's male and female plants, and we want all of our medicine to come from the female plant. It's the most rich. It has the most terpenes, cannabinoids, essential fatty acids, bioflavonoids, and cannaflavins. So the goal is to take the least amount. So flowering strains of hemp, lab tested. We want to make sure it's pure and it's potent. You want to know exactly what's in it. Organic practices. I don't even need to get into that. We all know that organic is better than not organic. And then whole plant. We want to look at whole plant medicines as the primary choice. And because what they're able to do now is they're able to completely 100% pull out. So if you think of this plant, you've got 500 components. Now science is able to pull each component out, and they're starting to make mixtures. And this is where we're going to see the pharmaceutical industry start to work with cannabinoids more and more. But for right now, until that happens, when we're working with patients, we'd like them to have the most part of the plant, all of it, whole plant medicine. Okay, let me just see where else here. So like I said, we want to look at cannabinoid profiles, terpenes, lab results. So the efficacy, efficacy of cannabinoid therapeutics varies from person to person, and how it affects them has to do with disease processes, symptoms, genetics, age, pharmaceuticals, and lifestyle factors. So even some people will take cannabis like on a regular basis, and then one day they'll be like, oh, it didn't work the same way that it worked yesterday. Why is that? My question is, let's look at everything that you did or didn't do yesterday. Did you eat, did you have a beer? Or did you, what did you do in your life that could have contributed to something different, right? And if they've done nothing different, then sometimes what happens is patients have outgrown that method of administration, meaning that that type of product isn't good for them anymore and they have to switch it up. So start low and go slow, right? We want patients to have 100% a positive experience. It's important to hydrate. Oftentimes we are all very much dehydrated. Hydration is important. You should hydrate half your body weight in water unless you're on a fluid restriction. Also, increasing healthy dietary fat intake. Cannabis is fat soluble, lipophilic, meaning that it gets extracted in alcohol, it gets extracted in fat. In order for it to get into your cells appropriately, it needs to be attached to fat. And so having a healthy amount of dietary fat in your diet will positively affect the impact that you'll have using cannabis. And then when you're starting to work with symptoms, we're not looking, like when we're first starting to work, I'll see a patient that has on all these medications, all these conditions, all these symptoms. We start with 1 or 2 symptoms. That's it, right? And 1 or 2 symptoms at a time, 1 or 2 products at a time. And like I said, we feel as cannabis nurses that using the plant multiple different ways is the best to hit all of those different receptors. Inhalation doesn't hit gut receptors the same way if you took a capsule or a tincture or a gummy, right? It just doesn't hit it the same way. So it's important when we're working for different disease processes and what we're actually looking at, what is going on with you and how comfortable you feel with the plant is going to determine the best method of administration. And only you know as a patient what's best for you. And that's why we guide you. We ask critical questions, lead you down the path. And at the end of the consultation with us, you tell us exactly what you need. An experiment. We're all, I don't say trial and error. I say trial and success, right? Cannabis, it took me 2 years. I'm a nurse. I'm educated. I've done research, like real research, published. And it took me 2 years to figure out how to make cannabis work for me. And so I know what we've been doing as cannabis nurses is we are decreasing the amount of time to help patients get comfortable. So the other thing that's really important too is to journal everything that you do. Really important. And the reason why is because I had said everything that we do or don't do in our lives affects our endocannabinoid system and also affects how cannabis is going to work in our bodies. Winding down here, getting close to the end. Okay, this is a good one. This is topicals. And the reason why I'm bringing up topicals is because my mom was plagued with stigma. Totally, like I said, wrote me out of her will, blocked me on Facebook, the whole 9 yards. And finally, when she was open to it, I wanted her to start off with a product that she felt safe with. So I had one of my caregivers, who's a custom formulator, take CBD isolate, 1 molecule, MCT oil, which is a type of coconut oil. It's removed, it's fractionated, it's medium chain triglyceride oil. 2 ingredients, put them together, made a little bottle, and I sent it to her. And so these were the only 2 ingredients, and I wanted her to feel safe taking it. Now, the thing with topicals, which is interesting, is they're applied to the skin for localized symptom relief. It provides anti-inflammatory and analgesia. It does not enter the bloodstream, so you're not going to get impaired using topicals. So topical products can include creams, lotions, salves, balms, ointments, sprays, roll-ons, right? And a cannabis topical application is a really great introduction to cannabinoid therapeutics because, like I said, it is non-impairing. It's easy to incorporate into our healing routines and our daily lives. So the interesting thing about topicals, right? There is a unique, so we talk about the plant, there's over 500 components in the plant. Terpenes, maybe you've heard of terpenes before. Terpenes are found in fruits and vegetables and essential oils. And a lot of these terpenes are found, they put them into the topical products. And what it does is it adds aromatherapy. It adds a layer of therapeutic medicinal value. CBD particularly works on receptors in our skin where they're absorbed locally, like I said, to reduce the pain, the inflammation, and brings release. The onset of topicals is anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. And the bioavailability, meaning this, getting into our bloodstream is 0. You cannot get impaired using CBD or even THC topicals. Transdermal patches are different. So if you buy a patch, the patch has a chemical component in it to break down the skin so it allows the absorption of that medicine into the capillaries, which gets carried in through our bloodstream. So patches are very, very different than lotions, creams, salves. And that's important to know. So the goal, really, what is the goal? Again, is to relieve suffering and improve quality of life, and that looks different for everyone. Okay, so the safety slide. This is the safety slide, and the reason why I bring up the safety slide is because we care. There's been no lethal dose of cannabis. If you do have any side effects, they go away with time. Oftentimes, CBD is a great tool to decrease the intensity of THC. The bottom line, too, is when you see, these look scary, all of these things here, but like I said, those are high doses. Low dosing, this doesn't happen. And this is another thing, too, that we talked about before is the Cytochrome P450. So this is how the system in our liver that metabolizes drugs out. And some drugs become more effective and some become less effective. So like I had said, drugs that interact with grapefruit, you just need to dose separately. And, you know, like I said, it's really safe. The other thing that's important that I forgot to mention is that, you know how opioids, we have opioid receptors, and on our brainstem, opioids can stop us from breathing. There are no receptors, cannabinoid receptors on our brainstem, meaning that if you overconsume, you will not die. You may feel like you're gonna die, but you're not gonna die. There have been 0 lethal deaths regards to cannabis consumption. Okay, this is the other thing too. I've got a great story. So the other thing too, when you're starting to use cannabis, oftentimes people get overwhelmed because they're plagued with stigma. I know it happened to me. I started to feel better and I felt guilty for feeling better. I'm like, what are they gonna think? Are they gonna think I'm high? Oh my God. You know, and so the bottom line is don't judge how you feel. This is your journey. And here's a story about one of my nurse practitioners who was getting her PhD. And she had such bad anxiety. She was having panic attacks. And the product that she was using wasn't working. So we introduced her as cannabis nurses. We worked with her and we introduced her to a new product. And basically, she had such a good response that she felt like she was high. She goes, oh my God, I'm high. I go, no, you're not high. You're just not anxious anymore. You're not used to knowing what it feels like to not be anxious. You're so used to being in that hyper vigilant state of fight or flight. Now that you can actually breathe and relax, you're not used to it. So that's what I tell patients too over time. It's not that you're gonna get used to it, but you're not used to feeling a certain way. It can feel a little scary. So don't judge the feeling. Okay. So we talked about that. Let me see, are we getting to the end? All right, here we go. This is it, we're coming down to the end. So as clinicians in the traditional system, what do we generally do? We focus on body parts, symptoms, drugs, pharmaceuticals. We're lucky if we get to mental, emotional health, and rarely do we ever get to spiritual health unless someone's dying, right? So as cannabis clinicians, we start by working with your spirit first. There is no one more important than you, and we ask those questions. What's important to you and how do you want to live your life? So cannabis, like I said before, is pleiotropic, meaning that it addresses multiple physiologies, conditions, and symptoms all at the exact same time. And a plan can be custom tailored to you. And all of these different things here that are listed affect how cannabis may work for you in your body. I'm going to talk a little bit about palliative care and hospice. I've done both palliative care and hospice, quality of life at the end of life. And like I said, end-of-life care revolves around comfort and symptom relief and peace of mind. So cannabis can help with end-of-life care for both patient and family. And cannabis, I've seen, has really been helpful in helping patients and families do legacy work, sitting together, talking about the past, creating a legacy. And really I've seen a couple of hospice patients, you know, Marta, you saw that one woman on the beginning of the slide. She was sent to me. Actually, it was, she lives down in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. She was sent home on hospice. I got a call from the social worker saying that, yeah, Marta bought all kinds of cannabis and she doesn't know what she's doing. She got 2 weeks to live. Can you help her? I'm like, yes. So I went to her house because I've done home visiting nurses before. I've also been a hospice nurse, and went to her home. I was with her husband, with her son, and we looked at all the products she had on the table. And basically, Marta, how do you want to use this plant? Why do you want to use this plant? She goes, Sherri, I'm ready to die. I just don't want to die in pain. I'm like, okay. So we figured out a plan for her. She was just using CBD in the daytime and THC at night to sleep. And it actually helped her. Worked with her for a couple days, checked in, I'm doing okay. I said, if you need me, call me. I didn't hear anything for months. I thought she died. I get a call on December 5th. This is 2017. I started working with her in August. 2017, December 5th, she called me up from her oncologist's office, and she says they can't find it. They have a whole team coming in to look at all of my scans. Her unresectable stage 4 pancreatic cancer, failed chemo, failed radiation, sent home to die. 5 months later, the cancer's gone. So, yeah, and that doesn't happen to everyone. I just want to tell you that right now. We are still in the space of research evolving, but it does happen. And I've seen this. I take care of a lot of kids, and I'm seeing a ton of kids that are going into remission from their cancers. So what ended up happening with Marta was, Marta goes into remission, and her doctor is on the phone, and he goes, I want to get her off of some of these drugs. Can you help me? I go, I certainly can. I said, you take care of decreasing the drugs, and I will take care of helping her to adjust her cannabis. So here we are years later. She's completely still in remission. You just saw that video up there of her. That was recorded a month ago. Her and her husband, and this is another good story. So her husband, and she didn't tell me this, her husband was diagnosed with cancer last year. She didn't call me or tell me. She just started treating him herself with the oils that she had. Guess who else is in remission? Yeah. So, and I didn't know that at all until she called me and told me. I thought it was really interesting. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so it's really, really important to talk to your healthcare provider about cannabis. Cannabis is medicine. And, when I am working with clinicians and nurses, I talk about the Endocannabinoid System, I talk about the Journal of Nursing Regulation, and I really talk about we have an obligation. If we know that something can help a patient, we have a moral, legal, ethical obligation to share the information. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. So providers need to learn about cannabinoids. There's over 30,000 studies on PubMed alone. That's a lot. And your provider should support your wishes to be an advocate and not to judge you. And the other thing that's important too is that as nurses, we talk to doctors all the time. I've actually gone to a hospital. Went to Boston Medical Center with a patient that I've been taking care of for a long time. She needed to be admitted. I went with her to the hospital and I talked to the entire emergency room team. And I basically said to them that she needs her cannabis. If you want her in and out of the hospital, you need to let her have her cannabis. Because I guarantee you, if you take it away, she won't be leaving. And I said, cannabis to her is like insulin to the insulin diabetic, right? She does not make enough of her own internal endogenous cannabinoids to keep her healthy. She needed to be admitted to the hospital for a procedure, but I knew based on, she was on over 40 pharmaceuticals. This is another nurse that I took care of. 40 pharmaceuticals, stage 4, advanced lupus, dying. And cannabis saved her life. She literally smoked her way into remission. She was from Ohio. And then what ended up happening is she started to take the oils. She got her life back. She got off all the pharmaceuticals. She still has chronic debilitating illness, but she's managing it effectively using cannabis and some of the other pharmaceuticals that she needs. And so like I said, we talk to physicians. We educate them. We want people to understand that this is not something to be feared. It is something that can help, and it works synergistically with traditional medicine if you know what you're doing. Okay. Okay, so here we go. So this is the community, and I have, there's a postcard here for you all. And there's also a handout on everything else that we talked about. So like I talked about, the Green Nurse Holistic Caring Community, the Holistic Caring Network started off in the West Coast. The Green Nurse started in the East Coast, and we just merged. So they're one big happy family. So we have a community for patients and providers. It's an ecosystem. We're actually developing a HMO. We're developing our platform to be able to take insurance once it becomes federally legal. We are on that trajectory, and it will happen. So we're planning to be able to take care of patients, to accept insurance, to help patients get reimbursed, and to literally bring this into the traditional system. So what we have right now is a community that's free to everyone. Free community that you can join. It's offline, it's private, off of social media, right? Completely private. Free introductory to cannabis course. Free patient portal where you can interact with clinicians across the globe. And then there is a free book club. Where's the book? So the founder, Elizabeth Mack, actually wrote Cannabis for Health, Become a Coach. And everyone's like, I don't want to get that book. I don't want to be a coach. I'm like, listen, you need to be your own coach. So this is about learning how to coach yourself using cannabis as medicine and other tools to help support and nourish. So the community is a really great place to go. And we also have, like I said, the CBD marketplace where we are vetting products and services for patients. And here's just an example here. This is Unity Formulas. This is a nurse designed formulation. So some of the nurses in our organization actually do formulate products, and this is one of them. And if you use, I don't know if you guys want to write this down, or I can send us the slide, 20% off for you to try these formulas. If you come into the community, we can actually educate you on how to take it. Literally, just do interactions right through the community and the patient portal. Yeah, www.unityformulas.com. If you want 20% off, you use that code, RETTGN2, is 20% off. Yep. And like I said, if you come and join the community, we can help you specifically right in the community for free, teach you how to dose right away. And then this is another one. I love her. She's great. She has her Nurse Grown Organics. She's one of the founding members. She's actually on the board of American Cannabis Nurses Association, and she has Nurse Grown Organics in Vermont. Her products are excellent as well, and she has a free shipping code for people that are interested. And then here we go. We have the books. So Elizabeth Mack, who's the CEO and founder of Holistic Caring Network, wrote this book. And this book here, Cannabis Handbook for Nurses, was written by nurses in the American Cannabis Nurses Association. I wrote Chapter 9, The Cannabis Nurse Experience. And this is a nursing textbook for nurses that has just been released. And so these are also really good resources. And then this is where we do questions. And then I think we have me jumping out of the plane, right? And then we'll do questions. We're gonna do one. So here, this is a good video. So, you know, when I was sick, one of my birthdays came along, and I wanted to go skydiving, and I couldn't do it, and I got sicker and sicker and sicker, and I said, God, if I can figure out how to make this cannabis work for me, I'm gonna jump out of a plane. So here we go.
Thank you. All right.
And I honestly, you know, it was very, very exhilarating. It's something that I always wanted to do. And the cannabis plants allowed me to engage with life, so I'm living my best life. And so thank you all for joining. I want you all to come underneath the umbrella and let us shower you with love and kindness and compassion and cannabis. We're here for you. Thank you all so much.
Also that these people, when they take and use the weed, that they do it in a controlled environment?
Oh, yes, of course. So when people are new to using cannabis and they go shopping, and they purchase, I have people start using it on the weekend, late in the afternoon when they're home. Because that way you can have the safe experience. So for example, if something happens and you're not feeling so good, you can go lay down, right? But for the most part, starting off slow, people don't have bad experiences. Excuse me?
Is somebody with them when they experiment with it, when they're trying it?
Well, it's
Be
a,
alone as you do it.
well, yeah, you can. You can be alone. I was alone.
You can get in trouble too.
How?
Because the person who was experimenting with something like,
What was that?
hey, this is nice, I like this. This is nice. Let me try a little bit more.
Right, and so then that's the misuse of cannabis. So there's 3 ways to use cannabis, medically.
Patient, as a patient, you want to try it more. Nobody's saying, no, you shouldn't do that. We're just your beginning stage, this is it. This is right here that you're living.
So the part that's really cool about working with cannabis nurses, we work with you for your comfort level. So if you feel more comfortable having it etched out in a care plan format, then we do that for you.
Gotta be there.
Well, here's the thing, is that there are certain patients that we have been there. They've hired us to come to their homes, and we go to the homes, and we teach them how to use it, and we actually sit with them while they consume it.
People able to get out on their own normally.
Oh yeah, I worked with a stage 4 lung cancer patient who was Chinese and didn't speak a word of English. And he couldn't use the tinctures because he was throwing up. He couldn't take the capsules. He couldn't do the gummies. Guess what I did?
He or she drives.
Well, no, because he had cancer and he was dying. But here's the thing. I drive and I use cannabis every day, 5 times a day, and I'm not impaired.
I've had cancer. My wife,
Yeah.
I had a wife with me.
Yeah, so basically, the bottom line is that when you are looking at impairment when using cannabis is different for each person, right? No 2 people are the same. And the bottom line is if patients feel more comfortable having it etched out in a care plan, that's what we do. It's about, so here's a classic example for starting to use cannabis. Go ahead.
You gotta be safeguards in there.
Oh, absolutely. The 5th National Council State Boards of Nursing, the 5th essential area of knowledge is the nurse shall have safety understanding when working with patients. So safety is our utmost importance when we're working with clients, and we meet you where you're at, and we create a care plan specific for you and what you need based on your comfort level.
I had a mother, which I love very much. And in the stages, she was in her 80s. She needed medicine. So she used to use me. I was the only one around. She had a group of doctors that she went to. Things have changed now. Today, until then. We went to this one doctor. She got the medicine that she wanted, but she wanted more. So down the street, there was another doctor. Gave her the same prescription. Now she had 2 prescriptions for the same item.
Now, is this the pharmaceuticals?
Oh, yeah, it's a regular.
Okay, so then that's called addiction.
That's right. Who took it? Well, my mother was alive. She knew what she was doing.
Right, but that's not, but she didn't do that with cannabis. You're telling me she did that with,
She'd be controlled.
right, but pharmaceuticals and plant medicines are completely different, not even in the same category, because they work in the body in a different way.
So it could be a pharmaceutical too.
Well, when they turn it, so absolutely. So pharmaceutical company does make a cannabis product called Marinol. Marinol is synthetic THC. They also make, the pharmaceutical companies also make a CBD product called Epidiolex. Epidiolex is a synthetic cannabinoid. So yes, pharmaceuticals, and the part that's interesting, we get excited about this, is that Dr. Raphael Mechoulam and all these other scientists are figuring out ways to pull the plant apart and put it back together to create specific formulations for specific patients. So that is really, really exciting, that the pharmaceutical companies will eventually be on board. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It will happen. No, there are safeguards, yes.
When we see this video or this information, we can write down
Do you know what I can do too, is I can send you my entire PowerPoint. You can get it in slides, you can turn it into a PDF document. And you can give it to them all. Absolutely. Yeah, give it to them. You guys can have it. Took me 20 hours to create this.
How would you encourage your physician to be the cannabis, like, because some of the physicians are not really accepting this type of
Yeah, so how I work with physicians is through education. Literally is through educating through the National Council State Boards of Nursing. Nurses are the most trusted profession for 19 years in a row. Did you know that? Yeah. So here's the thing too, is so working with physicians requires dialoguing, right? And also too, the history. The American Medical Association approved of it. They were against it when they tried to take it out of the pharmacopoeia in 1942. So it's just basically physicians. You think about new physicians, what do they learn about? Nutrition. I don't know. They're doing the best they can. So you got to think about this as another way. Why do you think they call it practicing medicine? Okay, they're practicing medicine. Get right? So, and I'm not here to shame any doctor or nurse because I didn't know about the endocannabinoid system. I graduated from Boston College in 1988. The endocannabinoid system hadn't been discovered yet, right? So that's the thing, is that they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know that they don't know it. And so our job as nurses to be able to educate them on the history of the plant and to even look at Schedule 1, no medicinal value, highly addictive, versus the government having a patent on cannabinoids, right? So it's about the cognitive dissonance, about what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and how we can really process this to make sense. What is the best and highest interest for our patients? And that's what we need to think of. And that's what I talk to doctors about too, is, you will be your patient. This is here to stay. It's not going away. And when I'm working with physicians, I'm just like, don't stick your head in the sand. You will be your patient's hero. I guarantee you. And I know for a fact that if doctors and nurses knew about the endocannabinoid system, I would not have suffered as long as I suffered for. Seriously. I had a history of migraine headaches, history of ADHD, a history of polycystic ovarian disease prior to me getting sick. All three of those conditions are endocannabinoid deficiency. And so when I took a hit and got sick, I started to spiral down. I call it the drain of despair. No matter what I didn't work until cannabis entered into my life.
Where you were talking about eventually insurance covering all this.
Yes.
What kind of costs are involved with doing cannabis?
Say that again?
What kind of cost is involved with people getting involved with doing this?
Well, I said, it depends. Let me see if I have my handout here. It depends upon if you want to get a medical card or not get a medical card, if you want to do cannabis consulting. I mean, the way to keep it cheap, right, to be able to afford it, is to get as much information as you can. That's why we want people to go to the community. You can learn a ton from the community. Medical cannabis card is good if you want to shop at a medical cannabis dispensary. Okay, it's great. You do save money on taxes, which is great. It can be very, very expensive. So what we do too is we work with caregivers in the community. Because cannabis is legal in Massachusetts medically, and it is also legal for adult use. There are lots of amazing caregivers in the community, and that's where I did all my learning. When I started on my cannabis journey at the end of 2014, there were no nurses that I knew of. There were no medical facilities. There were no doctors that I knew of. I didn't even know that there was a medical cannabis program in Massachusetts. I had no clue. So where I learned was through the community. I started getting in touch with caregivers and people that have been doing this underground for years and years and years, and I learned from them. I learned cultivation. I sat with the plants. I touched the plants. I was in the kitchen handling the plants, learning how to extract and make my own medicines. I fully immersed myself into cultivation and education and figured out a way how to heal myself using the plant and other healing modalities. So and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want you all to reach a new level of wellness. Yes?
I wanted to ask you about something you said in the beginning, the history of cannabis, that maybe I misunderstood. But did you say that it was kept under wraps or inaccessible to people in response to black and brown?
Oh, totally. Reefer madness was all racially motivated. I am ashamed. It is horrible. I get the chills. It makes me sick. And you think about way back when, they were able to propagandize. They were able to control the airwaves. There was no internet then, able to control radio, able to control television. And they did put on a Reefer Madness campaign. They blamed Mexicans and black people in order to protect the pharmaceutical industry, the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, the paper industry, and the food industry. It's horrible. And I'm sorry. I know, but I'm apologizing because I didn't know what I didn't know until I started to really start to study this plant and study the history, because it's important to know the history.
I'm thinking back to when acupuncture first came into existence. Everybody was saying no.
Of course.
I think you're running into the same.
Oh, yeah.
That they are until the education comes. And then
Same. Well, everyone thought the world was flat. It's the same example, right? Until, and that's okay. Everyone's at a different point in time and they're open to listening. And like my mother's a classic example. It took her having that experience of having cannabis work for her in a way that would work. I mean, here's a cute story for my mom really quick. So she started using cannabis, she did the topicals, and then from the topicals she went to the oils. And after the oils, she started doing the edibles. And she goes, I want to feel it. I want to feel a little elevated. I go, you do? I go, so I sent her a chocolate bar and I said, 1 square of chocolate, that is it, just eat 1 square. She goes, and if you have any trouble, just call me. You didn't hear from her. The next morning she called me and she goes, I didn't listen. I go, what do you mean you didn't listen? She goes, I had 3 squares. I was like, I go, Mom, are you okay? And she goes, oh my God, it was so wonderful. It was wonderful. I slept so good and I woke up in a good mood and I'm not so crabby today. So, yes, it's interesting. Right. Was that good?
Yes. I feel like that was 4 presentations. That was a lot of information. And did anybody not learn anything? I think everybody learned something for sure. Yeah, okay.
This is your Channel 9, Avon Community Access and Media Incorporated at avontv.org.